I start this tonight with Wisdom Teaches, respectfully taking the exact same thought. If you live in Michigan, you need to get used to the insanity of the weather, correct? Sitting and pretending like it doesn't happen is not good. So it's the same way in this tonight as I walk through this. I want to say, first and foremost, this is one of those really controversial subject matters in a whole bunch of people's lives. It is a subject that is not talked about or dealt with just because of the friction that it causes. And so when you're in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 18, and you hit the very first word, servants there, the word in the original language is not servants, it's slaves. Okay, so of course in our culture that we live in, the instant you say that, you've got this craziness that runs about. So we have to take that biblically and deal with it. So let's do that tonight. Wisdom teaches us that if we're trying to reach our culture, it is wise to spend time studying your culture and studying what goes on in it so you can figure out what we need to do to deal with some things. The conclusions that you draw from studying it should say, oh, this is how we should handle something. As the case in point, for example, Oakwood has always been a church that what we're about in our leadership is looking at people, analyzing people, and asking ourselves the questions that I deem as important. What is working? When I'm asking the question, what is working, I'm not asking what is going to bring a whole bunch of people into the church. I'm asking what is going to change lives. If all we're doing is trying to get numbers, I'm sorry, we'll switch gears. We'll take our band, which is phenomenal anyway, and we'll make Zachary dress in an Elvis Presley suit and start blowing smoke across the stage and turning all the lights off in the auditorium and doing some nonsense like that. It's entertainment, and unfortunately, a lot of churches are doing that. They have turned it into something that it's not. I want to force a church to ask the question, is life being changed? When I ask the question, is life being changed, it leads me into the next question. Are they really being changed? Not just temporarily, but for a long period of time. As we were going through the book of Hebrews, if you remember, in Hebrews we said it was written to three groups of people. It was written to Jews who believed that Jesus Christ was the Messiah and had given their life to him, but they were struggling. It was written to Jews that were on the fence. They hadn't quite made up their mind yet. And it was written to Jews who didn't believe at all. Okay. You can't take people that are on the fence particularly, but definitely people that don't believe at all, and force them into a mold. The only thing that works with that is giving them time. You sit down and allow the observation of watching something happen, listening to something take place, and seeing the Spirit of God move in something. So what I want is reality. I want to be able to set with the individuals that I call leadership or staff, and at the end of a year, I want to be able to say, did we actually see life change? Are there people that are different? And some of those people whose life change was very rapid. And some of those people, it's like a snail getting on Noah's Ark, okay? It just takes forever. That's fine. Okay, I know a lot of pastor friends of mine have a really difficult time with that because they think it should be cookie cut, and it's not. It should be something where life's changed. So as I start examining my country, I have a lot to complain about, just like you do. I'm not real happy right now. I told you I don't watch the news, but my wife has been, yelling in the living room, come look at these idiots in New York, and idiots at some of these universities that are up yelling, "I'm Hamas." And I'm standing there looking at them like, no, you're not. You're just dumber than dirt. Because you're yelling that in a country where you've been given the freedom to open your fat mouth. If you went over to the country that actually believes the nonsense that you're yelling about right now, they'd just walk you out into the middle of a soccer field and cut your head off. And it would cure your fat mouth. Because they wouldn't tolerate the fact that you're a woman expressing your opinion and you're defending the nonsense of a group of individuals who cut off babies' heads and put babies in ovens and walked out of the house and let them cook. Animals. Okay, that's enough of that part of the sermon. So if I'm going to look at my country and I'm going to say, God, where are we? Well, the conclusions that we draw about society is every society has different values. If you find out what the values of a culture is, it becomes easier to reach them. The only problem in America, the only moral value that's in our society is equal rights. And the problem with that is it's going out the door super, super fast. Many years ago, if you were black, Hispanic, a woman, and you got up and yelled equal rights, everybody and their brother would be fighting for you. In this culture today, if you're a Jew and you get up and talk about equal rights, so you've just walked into another subject matter that we're not really interested in helping you with that. And so when I say that value is going out the door, it is. We have no sexual morality in this country. We have no ethical morality in this country. There's no spiritual standards in this country. There's no family values in this country. And I know that a few of you go, what do you mean by that? We don't even understand love in this country. And let's be honest with each other. I do a lot of counseling, and if you want to have some fun in counseling, just figure out in a normal family psyche who's going to do the dishes. And you'll start a dogfight. Commercials. You can't even watch a commercial anymore. Have you ever noticed when they sell laundry detergent that women can't sell laundry detergent anymore? Have you noticed that? Watch all laundry detergent commercials. The woman's not doing the laundry. It's a man doing the laundry. How many of you guys in here do laundry? My wife won't let me near the machine. She's afraid what might happen if I do laundry. I think all white stuff should be pink. Anyone agree with me? Okay, so she's not going to let me do laundry. But what I don't appreciate is if we're going to play the equality game, then can we have a commercial where a lady's doing it, and another commercial where a black lady's doing it, and another commercial where a man's doing it, and another commercial where your dippy little third grader's doing it, if we're going to play equality? But that's not what we're playing. We're playing a game. And so values have gone out the door. So when I sit down and I say, okay, God, how do I deal with this? Well, everything in the value system that we live in is about everyone's rights. And when I say everyone's rights, that's literally what I mean. We have women's rights, we have illegal immigrants' rights, we have criminals' rights, we have the homeless rights. And if you have any doubt about that at all, the biggest subject that is going on in our society right now is how to fight squatters. Have you noticed that? That's the game that's being played. Okay, I'm sorry, when I grew up, you knocked on a door and no one was there and you walked into the house and started living there, the person that owned it could come, open the door, put a gun in your face and suggest you leave the house. Now you can go to jail for doing that. And so it has changed. And I'm being honest with you about the only individuals in this country that have no rights is old, white, Christian males. And so you can imagine an individual like me, how I fit in this society. I have fun. If I take our society and I go, this is who we are, I just prefer to be honest about it. I regularly, my lovely wife regularly looks at me and goes, I cannot believe you said that to so-and-so. Kristen, in the world that we live in, if you don't get your rights, please hear this. If you don't get your rights, what do? You have been raised in the United States of America. You have been raised in a country that's union-oriented. I'm not having a discussion about unions tonight. I really don't give a care what you think. What I care about is the outcome of something and what has happened in our country. Everything is about people's rights, and when they don't get them, strikes happen, protest happens, rebellion against countries happen, rebellion against companies happen, and the reason is because most people think that everyone's supposed to be equal. How many of you have discovered that most of us are not equal? How many of you take medicine from a doctor? How many of you are women in here? The next time a doctor looks at you and tells you he's going to give you medicine, ask him who the medicine was designed for. Because all prescriptions in the United States of America were not designed for you girls. They were designed for men. So when a prescription is handed to you, you are taking what they give to a man, not to a woman. And yet most of you in this room didn't know that. Our culture lives in a world of not thinking, not doing what it ought to do, and yet there's not a one of you in here that have ever taken a child to the doctor, and the doctor has not been concerned about taking your child, putting them on a scale, and weighing them so they find out exactly what they weigh, so they know exactly what to give to them medicine-wise. But they don't do the same thing for you wonderful ladies, and yet we're not equal. I spent 13 years fighting. I have walked into the ring and fought with ladies. It didn't matter that they were 3 dans higher than me. They still hit the ground. Why? Because like it or not, men stronger than women on the average. Yeah, I've met a few women that look like they played for the Green Bay Packers. That's another discussion, okay? But we're not equal. We're not equal in a foot race. We're not equal in mental ability. There's a boatload of things we're not equal in. And yet we have a world that looks at us and says, we're supposed to be equal. The problem is, you're a Christian, hear me out, you're a Christian and you're not called by God to live on this planet and to live in a world of equality. Women's rights mean nothing when you're standing in heaven. Equality means nothing when you're standing in heaven. How you were treated on your job means nothing when you're standing in heaven. Here's what means something. When you're standing in heaven, people will look around and go, who did you win to Jesus? Whose life did you change for eternity? We don't have that discussion now because we're living in a world where we allow this whole world to grab our head and turn us into something we're not supposed to be. So if you can allow me tonight to deal with it the way I would, I think we need to understand that the planet that we live on is a battlefield, so don't miss this. There's a whole lot of ways that I can come to this battle. When I come to this battle, I can come to it in different viewpoints. I choose a spiritual viewpoint. I am living in a world that a spiritual war is going on. It started in Genesis chapter 3. You don't have to turn to that. It was a conflict between Satan and man. If you read in the book of Daniel, it continued. Demons became involved in that warfare. Paul said that we're not wrestling against each other. We're wrestling with flesh and blood. He said we have a fight with fallen angels that are called principalities and powers. You do understand that inside of the church walls, when I make a statement that we're not wrestling with flesh and blood, we're fighting with fallen angels, and those fallen angels are called principalities and powers. You do understand that living in the world we live in, saying it here, there's every once in a while a few people that look at me like, whoa. But if I take it out of here and I say it out there in any situation out there, I'm considered losing it. Respectfully, you understand that the pressure that is applied out there doesn't mean anything? Because every one of those individuals that are applying the pressure are just like you. And they don't dig the thought, they won't talk about it, that they're going to die. And when they die, they will stand and look into the face of a holy God, and they will turn around and look at things that fry their brains, because no angels in heaven look like little fat people with diapers on and little wings playing harps. What angels look like is something that your mind can't imagine. About the only movie that I've ever seen in my lifetime that ever even got close to it. Did you ever see Raiders of the Lost Ark? Do you remember when the German put on the Jewish garb and tried to deal with the ark and the demonic force that came out of that? Okay, we call it demonic because it freaked our brains, but what it really was, it was God's angels in a very bad mood. And watching the guy's flesh just melt off of his body, I'm sorry, when I even bring that up, there's a part of the world out there that looks at me like, whoa, you're losing it. I'm asking you, do you believe that we live in a situation that this is a battlefield? If it's a battlefield, the battlefield is not between me and another individual. It's involved in a demonic force. Okay, since I will sit and say, okay, that's the premise that I'm going to come from, that's what's going on. Take your Bibles and turn to the book of John chapter 16, verse 2. Paul said we don't wrestle with flesh and blood. We fight principalities and powers. John chapter 8 says that there is a group of people called the children of God, and there is a group of people called the children of the devil. John chapter 15 says that there is a battle between the two, and John chapter 16 verse 2 says that there is going to come a point where they will ban you from the synagogue, yet an hour is coming for everyone who kills you to think that he is offering a service to God. Well, of course, when John said this, yes, he was talking to people that were alive then, but I also believe that that same battle has carried forth. You've heard me say in a sermon a few times, we live in this country, we are hemmed in and protected from a whole bunch of insanity. Do you know how many countries on this planet that you on this planet are living? Do you know how many countries every single day are in a war to slaughter Christians? Do you know how many countries that's going on? And our low-life, no-good, dog-faced, not worth trash news media won't report any of it. And they know it's going on. I'm not talking about just persecuting Christians. I'm talking about wholesale slaughter of believers. If you go to Burma, they find villages of Christians, the Quran people of the Burma, and just gut slaughter them. And it's going on regularly. They say that there is a born-again believer on this planet killed every 6 minutes. So tonight, while you're in here, if you're in here for an hour, you understand how many people died while you were sitting in here. In Iran and Iraq, they put them in baskets, hold them over a fire, and burn them alive. In China, their favorite way to kill Christians is either crucifying them or cutting their heads off. And it's going on while we stand here talking. So that battle has moved into other countries where there is a dearth. And so you understand the reason why I'm doing this tonight, there is a dearth of following God. If you go to Europe, if you go to particularly France, any place like that, no new churches are being built. All of the old churches that are there are museums. People go through them to look at them. A tiny speck of the population of France goes to church. Europe is walking down the exact same path. Canada has baptized themselves in it, and America's not far behind. Our church attendance in this country is going down the tubes. Does everybody understand that? Okay, stop. Ready? Isn't that a really exciting news, what I just did to you for 15 minutes? Okay. This is a warning. It's the enemy's game. He plays that in the world that doesn't know God. Now you step into the church, and he plays another game. The game he plays in church is getting Christians to fight with each other. The game he plays in church is getting men like me that are pastors to mess up, to commit adultery, to steal money. He does anything to destroy the name of the church. That's the battle. Peter is beating up this theme again and again and again. And so if you as an individual are like, this stuff is driving me nuts, I really want to see change, then Peter says it has to begin this way. He started out with us in verse 11, and he told us, you are strangers and foreigners living in this world. You have to live different. You don't get to live like everyone else does. But you can't detach yourself and call yourself somebody that's just not living here, so I'm not part of any of this. You have to live a divine life. When you hit verse 13 to 17, he talked about us being citizens of heaven and yet still being citizens in this world. That we're to be in the world but not of the world, so he wants us to live at a different level. He looks at each one of us and says, these are the things I want you to do, this is how I want you to do it, and I want you to change lives. And now we hit another realm. Not only do you have to submit to human institution and be model citizens, like we talked about last week, we hit verse 18, and it's another dimension. It's a role for Christians who are workers and employees dealing with the people that are above them. By living the other ways, we silenced the critics. We were citizens living for God in the middle of this world. And now we hit verse 18, and he says, servants. Oops, stop. I'm going to use the nice word, servants, but when I say stop, everybody look at me. How many of you believe that the Bible is true? Everyone who believes it, say amen. It's our guide for life, right? What if the Bible tells you to do something that you don't want to do? What if it tells you to do something that makes you uncomfortable? The Bible is not something that we get to go, I love this, but I don't like this. So I'm going to keep this, and I'm going to trash that. That's not obedience. It's a little stronger when I say it's not obedience. It's making up your own religion. Please, everybody hear this. It's making up your own belief system. I can't accept that. What you just said was, I can't handle the thing that God's saying I have to do over here, so I'm not going to do it. You just made up your own God and your own thing, and you're following your own path. I don't care that you call it Christianity. I don't care that you say you're a good Baptist or Methodist or Lutheran. That's not what's important. What's important is I have to stop and go, when Scripture speaks to me, I have to stop and I have to ask myself the question, why is he saying what he's saying, and why is he doing what he's doing, and how does it fit in my life? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, cool. Servants. All of yous that are servants, be subject to your master with all respect. Be subject to your masters with all respect. Not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are harsh. You've heard me use this number before. In the communities that they lived in, what percentage of the population was slaves? 65 to 70% of the population was a slave. So when the Christians came into church and they sat down, if any of you ever remember me teaching this, where did the slaves sit? Okay, slaves were in one of two places depending on where their master wanted them. The slaves either came to the front and sat, or the slaves stood in the back. If they had what you would understand would be semi-kind master, the slaves sat up the front. This was so the master could keep an eye on them. If the slave stood in the back, why would the slave be standing in the back? Not sitting, he's not on the ground, he's standing. Why is he back there? So he can tend to his master. Okay, the slaves up here sitting, their master had them there where they knew where they were, but they weren't worried about tending to them. The ones that were standing in the back were tending to them. For a bunch of you in this room who have been raised in church, you have never heard anyone say what I just got done saying. Most you've ever heard in church life was all of the men sit on one side and all the women sit on the other side. In some churches, they actually put a veil down the middle of the place so the women would not be talking to the men. That's about all you've heard. But someone bringing up the discussion of slaves in the congregation, they don't talk about that. Their world was so different than our world that almost 30 to 40% of the slaves that were there owned their own slaves. Can you imagine that? They were a slave to somebody, but they own their own slaves. Okay? So now, Jesus comes walking into the scene. How many of you believe that Jesus loves people and cares for people? Here comes Jesus. He changes a whole group of disciples' lives. After changing all of their lives, Peter, who is premier, a phenomenal teacher, he's just not the writer that Paul is, so we don't have all the stuff from Peter that we have from Brother Paul. He's writing a letter to look at you and say, I want you guys, you to win your world to Christ. And I'm going to take every single thing that you live in your life and I'm going to hit it. Servants, rebel against your masters and get your freedom. We're Christians. Is that what it says? Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect. You're an American citizen. When someone uses the word respect, you have a certain thought. But so we're clear, the Greek word here, P-H-O-B-O-S, is phobos. And phobos means fear, dread, and terror. Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, dread, and terror. Does that kind of put a different complexion on the verse? One, he didn't tell them you're free. Two, after all of that, he said, whether they are a good and gentle master or whether they are a harsh master. Okay, so we can play with words properly or improperly, however you want to. Everyone in this room that works for somebody, raise your hand. Hi, you're a slave. You understand that, right? Oh yeah, you got certain freedoms that you would talk about. Sorry, somebody still owns you. And you can run that discussion however you want to, but still there. How many of you in this room own your own company? How many got owners of your own company? How many of you are the head person on your job? CEO, boss, whatever, or in your position? How many of you are head person? Okay, I'm head person in my company. Some of you are retired. You're the head person in your group. You're the head over the dogs and the cats that are in the house now. Okay, but when you introduce this subject, it kind of makes people's blood crawl. Because so you understand what he's trying to say to us, he's looking at us and saying, I want you to be subject to your master, the person that's in charge, with all respect, fear, trembling, dread. And I'm going to put the thing on it of all of you slaves that are sitting here on the front row that have got a really good and gentle master. You're blessed. But also all you dudes that are standing in the back that have got a really harsh master, that he's got you back there so you can watch him to see if he snaps his fingers and needs you to move. Your mandate for submission is to be submissive to your master no matter what's going on. And Jesus Christ did not push equal rights, nor did he push freedom for slaves. Do you understand that? Okay, read your whole Bible. And when you get finished with your whole Bible, after you've read the whole thing, come back and look at me and tell me where Jesus fell on a whole bunch of these social issues. How many of you have noticed that Jesus Christ told us to pay taxes? Okay, do any of you hate paying taxes as bad as I do? Okay, and one of the reasons why you dislike paying taxes is because of that thing called taxation without. Okay, and that's annoying a whole bunch of you to death, right? I also don't appreciate the fact that a lot of the money that I pay in taxes goes to things that I'm really ticked off about. I don't understand why a mafia organization called Ukraine needs the money that we're giving them. I don't understand why Iran needs to get what it's getting. Do you? Okay, so all these things annoy the living daylights out of me. You go, well, just quit paying taxes. How many of you like the fire department? You appreciate the fire department when your house is burning, that they come to your house? How many of you appreciate the fact that a police officer shows up when you're getting mugged? Have you ever noticed you can't have it both ways? So Jesus Christ didn't come into the world to change the social order. If you live in a world of a dictator, and if you live in a world where the king can literally go off with your head and it's gone, if you live in a world where they can imprison you for anything, or if you live in a world where you're free and you can do what you want to do and you can vocalize whatever you want to vocalize, if that's the world you live in versus being in bondage in the other world, please don't miss this. God is not concerned about like you think He is. Because if you live as a slave your whole life and you ask Jesus Christ into your life, you walk into heaven and you spend eternity there. If you live your whole life as the head man and the boss, and you have everything, and you have millions, and you don't meet Jesus, and you walk into eternity, you spend eternity where? Hell. So Peter said the same things Christ said. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to deal with the things that you think are important. It is more important that you maintain, don't miss, it is more important that you maintain a faithful witness than you get what you think you have the right coming to you. It's more important for you to uphold the credibility of your church than for you to get a raise on your job. It's more important that you provide a platform to share your faith than having equal rights. Do you understand that? Do you also understand that even doing what I'm doing tonight, because I prayed about it like crazy, I run the risk of offending somebody? Because we don't appreciate hearing that. We're Americans. But you're not called to be about equal rights. You're not called to fight for feminism. You're not called to fight all of the nonsense that we get all wrapped up in. I don't care if you're fighting for the rights in the government of what's going on with kids in school and all that. Great, go get them. We have an election coming up. Everyone in this room, if you don't vote, I'm going to break your legs. Okay? I believe we're supposed to do those things. But whether Biden's in office or Trump's in office, it doesn't make a bit of difference for what the king is trying to do. Okay, I have to retract that. Because if Biden's in office, I feel the Antichrist is going to wind up here quicker. If Trump's in office, I think that will help deal with some things around the planet. One of them is what's going on in Israel right now under Trump would not be going on. Because Trump doesn't deal with it the way Biden's dealing with it. Trump would just simply say, hi, this is a red button. Move, and I press it. Now, no one likes having that discussion. But you understand the world doesn't respect that you're a really sweet guy. The world only respects one thing: power. Okay, so that means as a Christian, I get to do one of two things. I get to be a power mongrel, that's all I care about. Or I get to care about what I'm really supposed to care about, that Jesus Christ died for people's sins and they need to get saved. Are we allowed to be political? Yes, we are. We're allowed to fight all these battles as we realize one thing and one thing only. While I'm fighting the battle, I'm supposed to be pushing who? Jesus Christ. So that when the world looks at me, they see a follower of Jesus not a Republican, not an independent, not a Democrat. When the world looks at me, they're not supposed to see the thing of the world. They're supposed to look at me and go, okay, I don't know what is wrong with him, but he's got something I want. Does that make sense? I had the pleasure of meeting with a gentleman yesterday, and we're talking about things in life that are coming in his life. And he freaked me out when he reminded me when he was born again and how many years he's been a born-again believer. And the reason why he's a born-again believer is because of Dr. Blackwood, Andy Abear, Scott Powers, our drummer, and Frank Radcliff, your pastor. Because those four men left their normal job positions and went and coached 7th and 8th grade football. And Mike stood out there watching us. And Mike heard things that boggled his mind. His favorite thing that he ever heard was one of the varsity coaches was screaming at a bunch of the 7th graders and using profanity. And in front of the 7th graders, I slipped over and I said, "Shut your mouth or I'll drop you on a football field." What'd you say to me? You heard exactly what I said to you. You can scream at boys without using the F word. Use it again, you're going down. Yes, sir. So it was reported later on that the Reverend was a really nasty, foul man. So I went to the meeting with all the head coaches, and I said, do you really have to coach young boys by calling them SOBs and screaming the F word? I'll take any of you sitting here, gentlemen, and since we've divided the 7th and 8th grade team into two different groups, I'll let you have the one group and you coach them that way. I'll take the other group and I'll beat you on the field anytime you want to stand there. You know what they did in that room? Do you know what happened on the football field? All the coaches quit cussing. I lost one game that year to another dag-blasted Christian coach. Still hate that man. Do you get what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what we're in. God looks at us and says, I want you to use what you're in, the job, where you're working, what you're doing. I want you to do this for something special. Verse 19. For this finds favor if for the sake of conscience toward God a person endures grief when suffering unjustly. For this finds favor. One of my favorite things in the Bible. Favor from God. Watch your direct object, the subject matter you're dealing with, not talking about another person, it's talking about God. This finds favor, that favor is from God. The Greek says, if you read the original language, what it says in English, it says, this is a grace that is a grace. For this finds favor. This is a grace that is a grace. It literally means this is an unmerited favor that is an unmerited favor. What it means in pure English is, it means that the work that you're doing, God admires it and it pleases God. So when you bear up under sorrows and when you bear up in your job being treated unjustly and improperly, you find favor from God. He is blown away by what you do. And when you read the next part, it says, if for the sake of conscience toward God, it literally means, stop, everyone look at me. It literally means you're sitting in here right now. Are you aware of the fact that God is watching you? So when you bow your head and pray, dear Father, are you aware of the fact He's listening? That's what this verse means. I find favor with Him if for the sake of conscience toward God. That literally means that I am aware that what I'm doing, what I'm doing at my job, what I'm doing when I'm at the doctor's office, what I'm doing when I'm at a restaurant, what I'm doing when I'm serving under a boss that is phenomenal, a CEO that knows what he's doing, or when I'm serving under a boss that is a complete idiot and the dumbest man that ever lived on the planet. But God stuck me in that job to deal with that idiot for what reason? Everybody stop and please think this through. How many of you in this room have at least one, and I'm not talking about your mate, at least one idiot in your life? You got somebody that just drives you out of your mind. And you say to God all the time, why did you put me here? Maybe you should really ask the question, what did you do that you deserved that? Because in the truest sense of the word, we always look at it just one-sided. We always look at it, oh, God wants to use me to reach that person. Well, God's double sword, sweetheart. He just doesn't deal with, I want to reach him every single time. It's like taking a hammer and hitting your thumb with it, and you come back and hit yourself in the face trying to not, it's a dual weapon, okay? So God uses whatever he's using in your life to smack them, but also to smack you. He wants change on both sides of the fence. So I told my wife before I married her, it gives me great joy to hear the preacher standing there going, God has put you in their life for change, and he's also given me to you, baby. So it's dual. And so I have to sit down and say that this is what this verse is talking about. It's hitting me right in the face. If for the sake of conscience toward God, a person endures grief when suffering unjustly. Well, he goes on and explains it in verse 20. For what credit is there if when you sin and are harshly treated, the word in Greek, harshly treated, is a really interesting word. We take harshly treated in America and we kind of run a thought, it's kind of treating me bad. Well, the word harshly treated means being smacked with a fist, slapped in the face, and beat up severely. Most of you on your jobs have never had that happen to you. But he literally says, what credit is this? If when you're sinning, you're harshly treated, you endure it with patience. But if when you do what is right and suffer for it, you patiently endure it, this finds favor with God. Back to the exact same terminology. Since I know you're brilliant and you're smart, this is a testimony beyond testimony. It's looking at you and saying, everywhere you go, in every situation you've ever been put in, that God is putting you in that situation for a reason. Every awkward moment you have to endure, every rough thing that you have to endure, God has put you there for a purpose. And that purpose is that he wants to use you to win people to Jesus Christ. Okay? When I say that, the problem in our world that we live in is that's gone by the wayside. By the wayside. What I mean by that, Robin brought it up in the Bible study, my wife, that we were in this morning. I listened to her saying it to a lady the other night that she was having a discussion with. How many of you believe you're supposed to share your faith with people? Okay, you do understand sharing your faith doesn't mean just living a good life in front of them. Because that's what a lot of Christians do. Well, I'm just living it in front of them. You do know there's a whole bunch of people out there that are really nice who are not Christians. Okay, so they don't know whether you're doing it, whether you're living for Christ or not. They have no idea. They just think you're a nice person. And so when an individual said that in front of my wife, that's immediately what my wife brought up. She said, Frank was involved in the meeting, and I was when it all started. The guy who wrote the book called Friendship Evangelism, I was there for the very first thing, and I sat there in the meeting listening to everything that was being said, and I said, well, that sounds really good. There's only one problem with that. You're giving people an out so they don't have to share their faith. Because friendship evangelism means I take people's groceries in, I cut their grass, I do all these other things. And one time when they walk up and look at me and go, why are you so nice? I'm supposed to look at them and go, because I know Jesus. Well, half the time they're not going to ask that question. That's what I said in the meeting. And I said, and the other part of it that gets me is my Bible teaches me I'm supposed to share my faith. I believe it's supposed to be dual. I'm supposed to share my faith with people, and I'm supposed to live a life like a believer. Does that make sense? Okay, well, that's hard on us because there's a whole reason why there's a bunch of you in here that are not in sales. Okay, sales is a job that if you don't own your own company and you're just wanting to make money, sales is one of the greatest jobs in the world for making really big money. But the reason why most people don't do it is because they can't handle rejection. And most people can't handle doing that next thing. Hi, I just told you everything there is to tell you about the product that I'm selling it to you. Would you buy it? Most of us don't know how to do that. That freaks us out. Witnessing is the same way. We'll sit and tell people all day long about Jesus and who he is, but to look at a person and say, hey, could I ask you something? If you were to die right now, do you know where you'd spend eternity? That freaks us all out. We're like, it's called closing the sale. I believe you ought to close the sale. I believe you're going to do all these good things to people. You're going to live for God. You're going to talk about the Lord. You're going to say all those things. You need to close the sale. You need to look at them and say, hi, if you were to die right now, do you know where you'd spend eternity? Oh, they might not like me. Most people don't like you anyway. Oh, they're going to think I'm weird. I don't need to say it. It's rhetorical. So see, since I live in that world, that it really doesn't matter what they think about me or what they're going to say to me. It doesn't matter whether I am a stranger and a foreigner. It doesn't matter if I'm a citizen living in this world, and it doesn't matter if I'm a slave under a master that's good or bad. My job is to win people to Jesus Christ. Now, don't miss this, what I will say next. Historically, these verses are profound. Because what happened that was so powerful was slaves figured out something. Jesus is in charge. And since he's in charge, I will serve my master, but I will talk about my God all the time while I serve my master. Does it make sense? So historically, do you know how many Roman citizens were won to Christ because they had Jewish Christian slaves in their house? It produced the most phenomenal revival in Rome. Roman citizens got saved like crazy. And do you know what Roman citizens did to reward their slaves? They took them out into the court in front of everybody, took the slave plaque off of them and smashed it on the ground and gave them their freedom. How many of you believe that God's in charge? Amen. So can't God use your slavery to win your master and then release you as a slave? Are you ready? Or he might just sell you to another master that you have to win to the Lord. Oh, that sucks. When do I ever get to be the master? You never do. Because he's the master. We're just under shepherds. That make sense? Okay, let's finish these verses so you can deal with your questions tonight. When you got saved, God literally saved you to do this. My question comes, okay, God, how severe is this going to get? The last three verses, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21. You have been called for this purpose, because Christ also suffered for you. Stop. You have been called for this purpose. Go back to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. Just a few verses behind where we are now. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. That's your position. Whatever you are, wherever you're doing it, whatever you're walking through, that's what God wants you to do. That makes sense to everybody, right? Cool. So when I read verse 21, you've been called for this purpose. I was called, saved, salvation word, for a purpose. I was called into a world of following Jesus. The moment that I got called into a world following Jesus, the why does it have to be like this comes up. Well, it comes up because I'm a child of the king, and there's a whole other group of people that are children of the enemy. And a battle starts, and a war takes place, and a fight gets going. And so he called me for this purpose. And then he looked at me and said, Frank, not only am I calling you to this, but I want to be the prime example to you. So again, verse 21, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you would follow in his steps. I love that word. It is the Greek word ichnos, I-C-H-N-O-S, and it means footprints. So he literally said that you would follow my footprints. Just like that picture you see all over the place of a daddy walking in the snow and his little guys behind him trying to take those giant steps to get his feet into the same spots. That's what this verse means. He walked it, and I'm supposed to live in it. And verse 22, he committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth. That means he never sinned, and he never deceived anyone. Verse 23 says, and while being abusively insulted, he did not insult in return. While suffering, he did not threaten. It means he didn't threaten revenge when he was suffering. It doesn't mean he threw it back in their faces and insulted them. He took it. Okay, look at everybody, look at me, or look at me real quick, and let me finish this, and just grab hold of it. It is me as an individual and you saying, God, here's me, and use me however you want to use me. If you want to put me in a situation where I am laughed at, mocked, made fun of, if you want to put me in a situation that there's a fight going on all the time, if you want to put me with a really great employer, or if you want to put me with the dumbest employer in the world, I will go wherever you tell me to go. I will serve wherever you tell me to serve. You guys do understand that that attitude makes him smile. Do we understand that? But how many of you are just like me? I will do anything you tell me to do, God, but please let me do it in Florida. I will do anything you tell me to do, God, but please let me do it in shorts and a t-shirt. I will do anything you tell me to do, God, but please let me win the lottery. You get it? So what Jesus did in being the example was, he looked at us and said, I didn't sin. I had no deceit in my mouth for individuals. When I was abused, I didn't abuse back. When I was suffering, I didn't cuss and threaten and scream at them. But instead, I kept entrusting myself. He said, Peter, he kept entrusting himself to him who judges righteously. That is the part of my Christian life that I have to get a hold of. Here's me serving God, following my Lord, and whatever he calls me to do, I need to do. And I need to trust him with my life. You guys understand that that trust issue is the fun issue, right? Because that's the hard one. I'm going to step out on faith and trust him.